Something is wrong in a city where organ donors sign combat waivers. That was the first line in the consent form, though the hospital clerk called it a legacy formatting issue and told me to initial anyway. I initialed. At the time, I thought the dangerous part of my life was already behind me. I was 23, working split shifts in the Floodgate district of Cairo 9, and in love with a woman whose lungs were failing because the city's light haze filters only worked in the upper wards. Her name was Mina Sourier. She coughed blood into folded handkerchiefs and apologized every time, as if illness were poor manners. She laughed rarely, but when she did, she leaned forward first, one hand against her side, like she was protecting the sound from being taxed. Cairo 9 runs on a clean lie. Officially, we are a post-war recovery megacity powered by regulated lumen cores and managed by public guilds. In practice, power moves through shrines, hospitals, media towers, and private contracts written in older language than the law. If you want treatment beyond the standard queue, you do not only need money, you need exchange value. Bloodline signatures, relic access, oath collateral, organ compatibility, or years from your own lifespan if you are desperate enough to deal with the wrong market. I was desperate enough to be useful, not yet desperate enough to understand the price sheet. Mina had a degenerative alveolar curse, the kind that starts as industrial scarring and ends in sigil bloom if untreated. In Cairo 9, curses are rarely supernatural in the storybook sense. They are patterned injuries, usually from old war residue, tainted tech, or relic dust exposure. The city classifies them by spread, bind depth, and salvageability. Mina's had reached bind depth 4. She needed a sequence treatment: purge, graft, and anchor. The anchor was the problem. Her body rejected synthetic anchors, and black market ones burned too hot. The specialist at East Spire Medical told us the best option was a live donor renal thread exchange linked to an aura stabilizer, a kidney in plain language. Mine matched. I remember the doctor saying, "Your compatibility score is unusually high," and looking at both of us a little too long after he said it, as if he expected a question we didn't know to ask. Mina cried in the tram home. Not loud, just quiet, shaking beside the window, while the ad screens above the doors played recruitment footage for the Arena Collegium, like the city had only one idea for the future. I told her we would do the surgery. I told her people donate organs every day. I told her all the forms looked frightening because legal departments are paid by the word. Most of that was wrong. And the surgery was done in a licensed Shrine Hospital hybrid because East Spire handled medical procedures and aura binding in the same wing. You signed 2 stacks of papers, one for the body, one for the field imprint. The body paperwork was clear. Risks, infection, hemorrhage, recovery timeline. The field paperwork was written in contract sigils and translated summaries. I asked what residual sympathetic resonance meant. The clerk said, "Emotional bleed, usually fades." I asked what competitive interference clause meant. She said, "Only relevant if either party enters regulated combat broadcast." Mina laughed, coughed, and said, "We're not exactly duelists." I signed again. The operation took 9 hours. When I woke, my left side felt cut in half and stitched back by someone impatient. Mina was in the next room under a translucent ward curtain, pale but breathing more evenly than she had in months. There was an anchor mark under her ribs, and a thin geometric ring glowing faint blue with each inhale. The surgeon told us the graft had held. He also told me to avoid stress spikes, relic proximity, and synchronized channeling environments for 6 months. I worked freight loading in a Floodgate district. Stress was not avoidable. Relic proximity was half the city if you counted transit nodes. I asked about the synchronized channeling part. Crowds, broadcasts, competitive arenas, mass shrines, he said. Places where directed aura fields overlap. Donor threads can sometimes echo. Rare, temporary. That word again, temporary. For the first 3 months, it felt worth everything. Mina's color returned. She could climb the stairs to our apartment without stopping at the landing. She stopped hiding blood-stained cloths in the laundry pail. We ate on the roof some nights and watched the drone lanes over the inner wards. And she started making plans in complete sentences instead of conditional ones. A short course in relay coding. A better district. Maybe saving enough to buy our own haze filter unit instead of renting from the building collective. When people tell stories like this, they usually point to one obvious moment when betrayal begins. Mine did not begin with a lipstick stain, a hidden message, or a forgotten date. It began with a contract offer and a camera crew. My best friend, June Arata, got selected for the Arena Collegium qualifiers. June and I grew up in neighboring blocks and learned early how to lose without making it visible. He was taller, faster, and born with a clean current sense, which meant he could feel lumen flow in walls and wires by touch. In a normal city, he would have become an engineer. In Cairo 9, he became a street circuit fighter until a legal trainer spotted him and moved him toward regulated matches. He talked too much when nervous, joked during injuries, and treated every authority figure like a temporary inconvenience. Mina used to say, June entered rooms like he was already apologizing for breaking something later. I trusted him completely. The Collegium is sold as sport. It is not only sport, it is media, licensing, military scouting, private sponsorship, and controlled violence dressed in school colors. Qualifiers are broadcast citywide. Winners get contracts, treatment credits, housing upgrades, and enough attention to rewrite a family line in one season. Losers get clips, scars, and sometimes recruitment offers from people no one should work for. June called us the night he got in. I need you both at the prelims, he said before I could answer properly. No excuses. If I collapse on live TV, I want witnesses who know I'm still handsome. Mina laughed harder than she had in weeks. We'll be there. I should have said no to the arena. I had the post-op warnings in writing. I still had the bruised IV marks on my wrist. But Mina wanted to celebrate, and I wanted one normal night where the future looked like something other than bills and medication schedules. The preliminaries were held at South Ring, one of the smaller Collegium domes, if you can call any place with 40,000 seats small. The lower concourse was full of smoke skewers, betting kiosks, sponsor shrines, and boys in counterfeit fighter jackets shouting odds into hand mics. Overhead, massive screens rotated through matchup brackets and patriotic ad reels. Strength for the city, discipline for the future. Cairo 9 loves moral language attached to profitable blood. The moment we entered the main bowl, my anchor scar, small and healed under my own ribs where the donor thread had been cut and sealed, started burning. Not sharp pain, a low-heat rhythmic, matching the arena pulse drums. Mina stiffened beside me and pressed a hand to her side in the same place. You okay? I asked. She nodded too quickly. Probably the crowd field. June arrived from the fighter tunnel 20 minutes later in warm-up wraps, grinning, bouncing on his heels, pretending he wasn't scanning the stands for us. When he saw Mina, he pointed at her and mouthed, "You look alive." She made a face and mouthed back, "Don't die on camera." Then the house lights dropped for introductions. The broadcast sigils ignited across the ceiling, and everything went wrong in a way the city should not have allowed. Arena fields are designed to isolate fighter output from spectator zones. That is basic safety. Layered barriers, current dampers, resonance shunts. They show diagrams in public service ads. They teach children to trust the glass. When June stepped into the ring and the first activation bell sounded, the field synchronized across the dome. I felt it hit my chest, then my spine, then the scar under my ribs. Mina gasped beside me. Her anchor mark flashed through her shirt bright enough for me to see. A warning glyph blinked on the nearest spectator rail, then vanished. On the central screen, June's opponent activated a standard edge form. June answered with a current thread feint he'd practiced for months. The two signatures crossed, and Mina doubled over like someone had driven a hook into her side. I grabbed her before she hit the concrete steps. "Medic!" I shouted, but the crowd noise swallowed it. Her eyes were wide, not panicked exactly, more shocked, like she was hearing a second sound under the arena drums. The anchor mark under her ribs was no longer blue. It had turned a violent white gold and was pulsing in sync with June's ring output. That should have been impossible. Donor thread resonance was supposed to be temporary, low-grade, and local to the transplant pair. June had no part in the surgery. And then the overhead broadcast banner glitched. For half a second, just one frame, the matchup display vanished and a system alert flashed across the main screen in plain civic script. Sympathetic triad link detected, unlicensed. Then it was gone, replaced by sponsor graphics and commentary chatter like nothing happened. A broadcast alert that contradicted what everyone saw. My first clue, and I almost missed it because Mina was shaking in my arms. 2 arena medics finally reached us. They checked her pulse, scanned the anchor, and exchanged a look they tried to hide. One said, "We need to move her now." The other looked at me and asked, "Was she recently bound under East Spire?" I said yes. He asked, "Who signed the anchor contract?" I said, "I did. She did." "Why?" He did not answer. They put Mina on a stretcher sling and took her through a side corridor, while I followed until security stopped me at the treatment gate because only registered family. I said, "I donated a kidney to keep her alive." The guard looked at his slate, then at me, and said, "You're listed as donor party, not spouse." June's match ended somewhere behind me. I don't know who won. I heard the crowd roar and felt my scar burn again like a live wire. By the time June found me in the medical concourse, I had blood under my fingernails from digging into my own palm, and 3 contradictory explanations from 3 different staff members. Field stress, anchor instability, spectator panic response. None of them matched the way the medics had looked at Mina's scan. June was still in half his fight wraps, sweat damp, mouth guard hanging from one hand. "What happened? They said she collapsed. Is she—" "Stable," I said. "For now." He put a hand on my shoulder and I flinched from the heat rolling off him. He noticed. "Your scar?" "Burning." His face changed. "Mine too." And I stared at him. June looked around, then yanked his wrap aside enough to show the side of his torso. Under the ribs, partly hidden by tape, was a fresh anchor ring scar. Not identical to Mina's. Same family of sigil geometry. I heard myself ask, very calmly, "Why do you have that?" June swore under his breath and dropped the wrap. "Ray, listen." "No. Start with the part where my girlfriend and my best friend now have matching illegal-looking scars." "It's not what you think." That sentence has destroyed more trust than any weapon in Cairo 9. June dragged me into an empty equipment alcove before I decided whether to hit him. He spoke fast, tripping over his own words for once. 3 months ago, I tore the kidney side channel in sparring. It wasn't life-threatening, but Collegium Med said if I wanted to pass qualifiers under full output, I needed a stabilizer graft. Sponsor covered it. East Spire did the procedure. East Spire, I repeated. He nodded, already bracing for what came next. "I didn't tell you because Mina was still recovering, and I didn't want her comparing treatments. And because I signed a confidentiality clause with the sponsor." "You signed a clause about a surgery that uses anchor tech in the same hospital where she got my kidney." "I know how it sounds." I laughed once. It came out wrong. "Do you?" He looked at me for a long second, then said the first honest thing either of us had said in that corridor. "No, not anymore." Before I could answer, a woman in a slate medical coat stepped into the alcove without announcing herself. Mid-30s, clean posture, no arena badge, just an East Spire insignia stitched at the collar and a black data case in one hand. "Rael Voss?" she asked. "No one uses my legal surname in lower wards unless paperwork is involved." I nodded. "I'm Dr. Ilya Naren. East Spire Anchor Division. Mina Soria requested you. She's conscious. We need to discuss a contract error." June muttered, "Contract error?" like the phrase offended him on principle. Dr. Naren's eyes flicked to his exposed anchor scar, then back to me. "You should come now, and he should come too." That was the second clue. Not if he is relevant. Not if he is available. She looked at June's side and included him immediately. The treatment room was quieter than the concourse, sound damped for interviews and high-value patients. Mina lay propped up against a medical wedge, color returned but too pale at the lips. There was a scan lattice projected above her midsection, rotating slow. 3 nodes pulsed around her anchor mark. One was labeled recipient. One was labeled donor. The third was labeled competitive channel. June stopped at the foot of the bed. "Mina." She looked at him first, then me. And I knew from that sequence alone, she was afraid of the order in which we might ask questions. "Doctor?" Naren set the black case on the counter and spoke in the tone of someone already drafting liability language in her head. "I'll be direct. The collapse was caused by an unauthorized sympathetic triad forming between 2 E-Spire anchor procedures linked by shared source material." I said, "Shared source material means what exactly?" She opened the case, removed 2 printed contract sheets and 1 sealed addendum, and placed them on the tray table where all 3 of us could see. During Mina's renal thread exchange, excess donor-compatible matrix was preserved under standard salvage protocol. That matrix was later allocated by sponsor request to support a fighter stabilization graft in a separate procedure. Her eyes moved to June. His. No one spoke. The air in the room felt thin. I asked, "You used material from my surgery in his body?" "Processed derivative matrix, yes." "Without my consent?" "With donor waiver authorization under Salvage Clause 7C. I looked at the paperwork. She tapped a highlighted line in the post-op forms I had signed, while sleep-deprived and terrified. Dense legal script. Residual biological and field-compatible material may be retained, processed, and reassigned for licensed therapeutic use under affiliated care frameworks. I remembered the clerk calling it legacy formatting. June said, "I never knew where the matrix came from." Dr. Naren nodded. "That is true. Recipient sourcing is typically anonymized." Mina had gone very still, watching both of us like someone waiting for glass to crack. "I didn't know either," she said. "Ray, I swear." I believed that part immediately. The rest of me was moving through anger in layers. "Then explain the triad," I said to Naren. "If donor thread resonance is temporary, why did the arena field trigger her anchor and his at the same time?" Naren hesitated. "Small, real. Because it was not a standard donor thread. Your compatibility pattern appears to produce high-fidelity sympathetic retention under synchronized channeling conditions. We have seen partial echoes before, but not a triad this stable." "Seen before," June repeated. "How many times?" Naren ignored him and looked at me the way surgeons do when they need a patient's cooperation more than their trust. "Mr. Voss, I need both of you to avoid arenas, shrines, and broadcast-linked activation zones until we can isolate the link." June laughed in disbelief. "I'm under live contract. Qualifiers started tonight. And if you activate again without dampening, she could hemorrhage." That shut him up. Mina closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked at me. "I told you I didn't want the Collegium tickets." "That's not the point." "I know." She was right. It was not the point. It was just the last clean memory before the room filled with paperwork. Naren produced the sealed addendum and placed it between us. "There is another issue. This triad was flagged by Arena Systems because the field recognized the pattern as a restricted linkage architecture. The city has an old combat licensing rule against unregistered triad anchors in broadcast zones." June stared. Why would that rule exist unless someone built this on purpose? Naren did not answer. Instead, she slid the addendum toward me. The seal on it was not E-Spire. It carried the mark of Astor Crown Media, the largest Collegium broadcast syndicate in Cairo 9. My pulse slowed in a way that usually means danger. Why is a media syndicate on a medical addendum? Because June Arata's treatment was sponsor-funded through an athlete development package, Naren said. And because sponsor underwriting included proprietary anchor modifications licensed for performance stabilization. Walter June swore loudly enough for the hallway mics to clip. I broke the seal. The addendum was not written for patients. It was written for risk managers. It described broadcast-compatible resilience enhancements, spectator engagement metrics under sustained output, and cross-linked recovery matrix optimization. Buried on page 2 was a clause authorizing emergency disclosure to syndicate partners if unregistered sympathetic events disrupted live transmission. They had legal language for what happened tonight. Not an accident then. At minimum, a known possibility. Maybe a tested one. Mina read over my shoulder and whispered, "They built us into a ratings problem." No one corrected her. June sat down hard on the visitor chair, forearms on his knees, fight wrap still half on, looking younger than I had seen him in years. I thought the sponsor was paying for rehab and a cleaner anchor. I thought I was lucky. Also, luck is what they call it when the paperwork is longer than the explanation, I said. Dr. Nairn stiffened, but she did not argue. You need dampeners immediately, all 3 of you. East Spire can install temporary suppressor bands tonight if you consent. I looked at the scan lattice rotating over Mina's torso. The 3rd node, competitive channel, kept pulsing in time with the arena drum still echoing through the building walls. Before any more procedures, I said, I want every record tied to our surgeries. Full chain, source logs, sponsor requests, internal notes. Nairn's expression changed, not to refusal, but to calculation. Those records cross medical and corporate privacy boundaries. Then give me the part you can, and tell me who blocks the rest. June stood back up. I want my contract file too, Mina said quietly, and I want to know whether my treatment fails if he keeps fighting. Nairn looked at each of us in turn. I can request a review packet under adverse event protocol. But it will trigger legal oversight. Good, I said. I let it. That decision cost us the rest of the night and most of the next week. Astor Crown sent 2 attorneys before dawn. Collegium Security tried to classify the collapse as a spectator incident. East Spire offered private mediation, expedited dampeners, and revised treatment credits if we signed non-disclosure acknowledgments. June's sponsor manager called him 6 times and kept saying career timing like it was a medical term. Mina's recovery room was moved twice, officially for monitoring, unofficially because too many people with badges wanted access. The city was trying to relabel what happened before it became a pattern someone else could see. We were not the only ones seeing it. By the 3rd day, a clip of the arena glitch frame, the 1-second sympathetic triad link detected, unlicensed banner, showed up on side channels. They slowed and enhanced by amateur archivists who treat broadcast errors like scripture. Most people dismissed it as fake. The ones who worked contracts did not. They started calling June's manager. They started calling East Spire. They started asking whether Astor Crown had been using athlete graft programs to test unlicensed anchor tech. That was when the first offer arrived. Not to Mina, not to June, to me. It came in a hand-delivered envelope with no sender mark, slipped under my apartment door while I was at the hospital. Inside was a 1-page settlement proposal written in clean legal shorthand. Compensation for unauthorized salvage reassignment. Full reimbursement of donor-related losses. Housing upgrade. Lifetime treatment coverage for Mina. Condition. Permanent waiver of claim. Destruction of copies, and non-participation in any inquiry regarding broadcast-linked anchor systems. At the bottom, 1 handwritten line. You have already given enough. Do not mistake attention for justice. No signature. Mina read it twice and set it down carefully. This is more money than we've ever had in one room. June, standing by the sink with both hands braced on the counter because his dampener band hurt like hell, said, That's why it's a trap. Mina looked at him sharply. Everything is a trap right now. She wasn't wrong. We were exhausted, scared, and suddenly expensive to multiple institutions. That is when people make clean mistakes for ugly reasons. I asked June, Did you tell your sponsor where I live? He snapped his head up. No. Did you tell anyone at all? No, Ray. I'm asking because someone knows exactly which part of this hurts us most, and it's not your career. June's jaw tightened. You think I sold your address for contract points? I think you signed papers you didn't read and trusted people who profit when we stay confused. He took that like a hit because it was true, and because he was already saying it to himself. Mina intervened before either of us made it worse. "Stop, both of you." Silence, except for the cheap haze filter rattling in the window. She pushed the settlement page back toward me. "I hate that I'm even thinking about it. I hate that this would fix the bills. I hate that they know that." Her fingers hovered over the handwritten line. "But if we sign, they keep doing this to people who don't catch the glitch." June looked at her, then at me. "So what's the move?" There is a version of this story where I say I chose principal and never looked at the money again. That is not what happened. I sat at our kitchen table until sunrise and ran numbers on treatment costs, lost shifts, legal fees, and how long Mina's meds would last if East Spire delayed us. I imagined taking the settlement, disappearing to a quieter ward, and pretending institutional theft was just another city tax. By morning, I knew exactly how much my silence was worth to them and hated myself for understanding the rate. We refused the offer. That was the point at which this stopped being a medical dispute and became a hunt. June's sponsor suspended him for temporary condition review, then leaked to sports channels that he had concealed an unlicensed enhancement. East Spire's records portal returned partial files with key pages missing, all under corporate privilege. Mina's next treatment slot was quietly postponed. Astor Crown ran a panel segment about illegal anchor culture in the lower wards, without naming any of us, and used footage from the same prelim night where their system flagged the triad. They wanted us isolated, discredited, and racing bills. Instead, a rival knocked on our door. Her name was Katie Rinn, ranked 5th in the Collegium feeder circuit, and famous for insulting opponents with surgical precision before dismantling them on camera. June hated her on principle. She had mocked his stance in an interview 2 months earlier and called him sponsor-built. He called her marketed cruelty. They were both occasionally right. She arrived wearing a hooded raincoat over training gear, no entourage, no cameras, and held up a portable dampener case before we could tell her to leave. "Don't close the door," she said. "I brought medical-grade suppressors and a guild log your lawyers will never get through official channels." June stared at her. "This is a joke." Katie looked at him. "If I wanted to humiliate you, I'd wait for the rematch." Mina, pale and tired and smarter than all of us at 3 in the afternoon, stepped aside first. "Come in." Katie set the dampener case on the table and opened a flat data slate. 3 weeks ago, a support tech I pay to ignore me flagged an internal arena maintenance bulletin after a private scrimmage in North Dome. Same error code as your broadcast glitch. Sympathetic triad detection. Unlicensed. Oh, she slid the slate toward me. The bulletin was scrubbed in 12 minutes. He copied the hash first. I read the line twice. Date, dome, error class, manual override by Astor Crown Field Control. June stopped pretending he didn't care. "There were others." Katie nodded once. "At least one more. Maybe more if they cleaned faster." "Why bring this to us?" I asked. Her answer came without delay. "Because my younger brother is in the junior draft pool and he just got offered a sponsor-funded anchor consult at East Spire. And because when institutions start using lower-tier bodies as prototype paperwork, they don't stop at your district." That made her motives plain enough to trust provisionally. She handed Mina one of the suppressor bands and gestured toward the clasp. "Put this over the anchor line when you're near broadcast fields. It won't solve the link, but it will blunt the spike." Then she looked at June. "Yours too, unless you enjoy collapsing on cue." Oh, June took the band. Pride and gratitude fighting visibly across his face. "I still don't like you." Cade shrugged. "That makes this easier." We spent the next hour comparing fragments. June's sponsor clauses, my donor waiver salvage language, Mina's treatment schedule delays, Kaide's maintenance bulletin hash, the 1-second broadcast glitch, and the East Spire adverse event packet with missing pages. Piece by piece, a pattern emerged. Sponsor-funded anchors, shared matrix sourcing, unregistered sympathetic links, live broadcast field interactions, internal alerts, rapid suppression, reputational cover. Evidence, not certainty. Enough to make someone dangerous. The cost showed up before dusk. Mina stood to refill the kettle, paused mid-step, and gripped the chair back hard. Her suppressor band had slipped half an inch. Under her shirt, the anchor mark flashed white gold once, then dimmed, June across the room and fully resting. It hissed and grabbed his side at the exact same moment. No arena, no shrine, no broadcast dome. Katie looked from one to the other, face suddenly stripped of all her practiced contempt. No, that shouldn't happen outside a synchronized field. I felt my own old donor scar start to burn. Not as strong as South Ring. Present enough. A low tone sounded from Cade's slate. She looked down. The screen displayed a system-wide civic notification, pushed across public channels. South Ring maintenance test. Local field calibration in progress minor. Resonance interference possible in adjacent wards. Our apartment was 6 transit blocks from South Ring. Cade lifted her eyes slowly. They're pulsing the ring during daytime housing hours. June said, calibration? They never run live field tests at this time. Mina sat down hard, breathing shallow through clenched teeth. They know where we live. No one corrected her. The city's safe systems were reaching through walls now. Arena fields, civic alerts. Calibration notices written like routine maintenance, while 3 linked scars burned in a kitchen over unpaid bills and cooling tea. I looked at the settlement offer still on the table, at the handwritten line telling me not to mistake attention for justice, and then at Kaide's scrubbed bulletin hash. We were past private mediation. By nightfall, the live feeds announced a special Astor Crown segment for the weekend finals, a public wedding broadcast between Mina Sorie and June Arata, framed as a recovery miracle and athlete devotion story with exclusive rights, sponsor endorsements, and donation drives already listed in the promo crawl. Mina had not accepted. June had not proposed. The ad used archival footage, manipulated captions, and a ring graphic superimposed over a still of Jun carrying Mina's stretcher at South Ring. I watched it 3 times in silence while the city cheered in the comment feed for a story no one had asked us to live. And then Mina looked at me and said very quietly, "They're building the ending before we tell the truth." That was the moment I understood the shape of the war. Not just over contracts, surgeries, or who signed which waiver. Over narrative control. Over who gets framed as patient, hero, liar, unstable donor, grateful survivor, jealous friend. In Cairo 9, if they can make the city watch the wrong story live, they can bury the right one under applause. I folded the settlement offer once, then again, and put it in my pocket. Kade closed her slate and stood. If they're staging a broadcast marriage, they need one thing more than consent. June looked sick. What? Timing, she said, and a field. Mina's anchor flashed again, faint but visible under the suppressor band. Outside, somewhere beyond the haze and drone lanes, South Ring's calibration pulse rolled across the district a second time, slow and deliberate, like a hand testing a lock. South Ring's calibration pulse rolled across the district a second time, slow and deliberate, like a hand testing a lock. Nobody in the apartment moved until the windows stopped rattling. Mina kept one hand over the suppressor band and breathed through her teeth, counting under her breath the way the East Spire nurse had taught her after the transplant. June was bent over the sink again, forehead nearly touching the cabinet, both palms flat, trying not to make a sound. Katie stood still by the table, eyes on the Civic Alert banner crawling across her slate, jaw set so hard I could see the muscle jumping near her ear. The room looked ordinary. Kettle, chipped cups, damp laundry, a loose tile by the door. That was the part that made it feel worse. A city-scale system had reached into a kitchen and made 3 bodies answer. And I took the suppressor band case and read the serial tags on the foam inserts. "These are arena grade," I said. Katie nodded. "Restricted issue." I did not borrow them politely. "Will they block the pulse?" "They'll reduce amplitude. They won't solve the link. Not if the field is tuned to the same pattern." June straightened slowly and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Pattern meaning us. Pattern meaning whatever they built using your anchor architecture, Cade said. You 3 are just the proof that it works outside the dome. Mina looked at me then, Not at June, not at K-Day. If they can trigger this from South Ring, they can trigger it during that fake wedding broadcast. No one argued. The ad was still looping on the wall screen because I hadn't turned it off. Recovery miracle. Love under pressure. Exclusive live ceremony. Astor Crown had already drafted our expressions for us. They had clips of Joan carrying a stretcher. And a freeze frame of Mina smiling from months ago. Old footage of me in the background, cut out of every version except one wide shot they tinted and blurred. They were not just using us. They were editing us into roles. K-Day pointed at the promo timestamp. Finals weekend, 2 days. June swore. They can't legally broadcast a marriage without consent. K-Day gave him a flat look. They can broadcast a staged ceremony, a vow segment, a symbolic commitment event, a sponsor ritual, or whatever language their lawyers invent. Then they let the city decide what it was. Mina leaned back against the chair. And if I refuse on camera, they call me unstable, or ungrateful, or say the triad event affected my judgment. I heard myself say, then we don't refuse on their stage, we break the stage. June looked up sharply. Ray, you said it yourself. They need timing and a field. I tapped the promo crawl. And a story they control. Katie's expression changed, just slightly. Interest. You have something. I have a donor waiver they abused, a scrubbed maintenance bulletin hash, a public glitch frame, a settlement offer, and a sponsor addendum that proves they knew triad events were possible. I looked at Mina. And we have a body response they can't explain away if it happens under the wrong conditions. Mina's face tightened. Don't talk like I'm evidence. I stopped, nodded. You're right. June pushed off the sink and came back to the table. What are you actually suggesting? Not a lawsuit first. We won't get through the weekend before they bury records and isolate us. We force a public contradiction the same way they plan to use public narrative against us. Cade folded her arms. Public reveal. It wasn't a question. She recognized the shape because she lived in the same machine. I looked at the dampener case. We need the field logs from South Ring. We need proof they're running calibration pulses into residential blocks. We need the actual wedding segment run sheet or trigger script. And we need a way to get the triad alert back on a live screen where they can't clip it. June gave a short, humorless laugh. That's all. Katie ignored him. Field control is behind 2 credential gates and a maintenance cage. I can get one gate if I use my fighter access. The second requires tech clearance. Taryn would have loved this, I muttered, before I realized I'd said it aloud. Katie looked at me. Who's Taryn? Wrong city, I said. Bad habit. Mina's fingers were still on her suppressor band. If this goes wrong, they don't just come for June's contract or my treatment. They come for your donor file too. They already did, I said, and pulled the settlement letter from my pocket, smoothing it flat. This was step 1. The calibration pulse hit a 3rd time. A weaker, maybe farther off, but all 3 scars answered. Mina flinched. June swore under his breath. My own side burned just enough to remind me the surgery was still part of my body, even if the city treated it like inventory. K-Dade picked up the settlement page and read it once. No sender mark, handwritten pressure line. Corporate legal didn't write this. Who did? Someone used to handling reluctant witnesses, media crisis, or private risk. She looked at June. Your sponsor manager ever say something like that in person? June shook his head. He says things like protecting your trajectory and brand volatility. This sounds older. Mina said, Can you get us into South Ring? K-Day looked at her for a long second, recalibrating. Up to that point, she had treated Mina as the injured party, the one to protect, while the fighters and idiots argued strategy. Mina asking that shifted the room. Yes, K-Day said. After midnight. Maintenance turnover window. But if we're caught inside the field spine, I lose ranking points at best and my license at worst. June snorted. You're assuming best case punishment. K-Day didn't even glance at him. I don't bring people on jobs if they panic, Arida. I don't panic. You just narrate your panic at high volume. Mina actually smiled, small and tired. June looked offended on instinct, then noticed Mina was smiling and let it go. I said, "We go in 4. Mina stays off the field path." Mina's smile vanished. No. No? No. My anchor is part of what they tuned. If we need to prove calibration is targeting the triad pattern, my response on a live meter matters. Katie backed me before I could answer. She's right. I turned to her. You just said her safety. I said suppressor's blunt amplitude. I did not say safe. There is no safe version now if they can pulse from 6 blocks away. Katie's voice stayed even. You are thinking like a donor. Do start thinking like a witness they are already using without consent. Mina held my gaze and said quietly, I'm not staying home while they write me into a wedding ad. That settled it. We split tasks for the next 6 hours. June called a contact in fighter equipment and, after 3 bad lies and 1 good one, secured a maintenance jacket set with forged barcodes. K-Day disappeared into the rain and returned with a relay patch kit, an obsolete field diagnostic key, and a bruised knuckle she refused to explain. I went through every paper and file we had, scanned them, duplicated them, and uploaded Deadman copies to 3 independent archive channels under timed release if my slate went offline. Mina, still pale and shaking on and off with each pulse tremor, did the hardest work of all. She wrote a statement. Not dramatic, not pleading. Names, dates, procedures, clauses, symptoms, delays. And the line from the ad that used her image without permission. She kept crossing out emotional words and replacing them with plain ones. At one point I said, You don't have to sound neutral. She didn't look up. I do if I want them to hear me before they decide I'm hysterical. There was no answer to that. We left after midnight. Cairo 9 looks almost honest in rain. The ad screens smear. The shrine lights blur. The drone lanes vanish above the haze and leave only sound. South Ring rose out of the downpour like a sealed bowl of glass and steel. Outer facade lit in sponsor colors even during maintenance hours. A giant banner still looped the finals promo with the staged wedding crawl running beneath bracket graphics. June's face every 20 seconds. Mina's smile every 40. Katie led us through a service alley under the eastern loading bays. We wore maintenance jackets over our clothes, hoods up, masks on, suppressor bands hidden under wraps. The first gate took Katie's fighter tag after a 2-second hesitation that made all of us stop breathing. The second gate rejected June's forged barcode twice before he slapped the scanner housing and muttered, Come on, you cheap liar, and it turned green. Katie gave him a look. Did you just bully a credential reader? It worked. Don't be proud of that. Inside, the maintenance corridors were bright, dry, and almost silent except for distant pumps and the soft thrum of standby field capacitors. I had only seen South Ring from the audience side. The back spine looked different. Cable trunks thicker than people, insulated relays stacked floor to ceiling, warning sigils stenciled over old blast doors, sport in front, infrastructure behind it, money wrapped around risk. K-Day stopped at a junction and pointed. Field control up 1 level. Calibration relay spine straight ahead. Broadcast uplink 2 levels down and heavily watched. June frowned. If the goal is a live screen contradiction, shouldn't we go broadcast first? Not without proof they're pulsing us deliberately, I said. They'll call it sabotage. We need logs. Mina braced against the wall as a faint vibration moved through the corridor. Not a full pulse, but a test ping. Her hand found the suppressor band under her jacket automatically. Katie noticed. Can you keep going? Mina nodded once. Don't ask me every 10 seconds. Katie's mouth twitched. Good. You're sounding like a fighter. June muttered, Please stop recruiting my almost girlfriend to insult me. Mina and I both looked at him. He held up both hands. That came out wrong. Human messiness in a maintenance corridor at 1 in the morning. Perfect timing. We reached the calibration relay room on the spine level and immediately saw the problem. The door was open, but not because maintenance was careless. Two private security men stood inside near the console bank, not arena techs. Black jackets, no collegium patches, earpieces tucked high. One was reading from a slate. The other was watching the relay meter like he'd been told what to look for but not why. Katie pulled us back behind the junction corner before they saw us. "Private contractors," she whispered. "Aster Crown or sponsor security." June peeked and cursed softly. "One of them worked my weigh-in tunnel last month." I looked at Mina. "If they're here in person during calibration, this isn't routine testing." Katie nodded. "No, they're verifying output against a target." June said, "So what, we just rush them?" Katie stared at him. "Do you hear yourself and think strategic?" He made a face. "I hear myself and think running out of time." He wasn't wrong. The finals weekend build would start before dawn. Once day crews arrived, the spine would be impossible to move through without broadcast cams catching everything. I checked the corridor map stenciled by the emergency panel. Secondary access duct to relay cooling manifold, maintenance crawl space, manual override hatch. "Can we cut their feed without them knowing immediately?" I asked. Katie leaned over the map, then looked toward the relay room. "Maybe. If we hit cooling sensors first and force a false overheat, they'll move to visual inspection." June grinned despite the tension. "That sounds like a plan." Katie looked at him. "Don't get excited. You're the decoy if they split." He blinked. "What?" "Recognizable face, fighter access jacket. You can plausibly be in the corridor if you look lost and angry." "I am often lost and angry." "Exactly," Mina whispered. "I hate that this makes sense." The move worked because institutional people trust familiar chaos more than unfamiliar silence. Kate and I crawled through the cooling duct access, while June stomped into the corridor swearing about field lag in my right side, loud enough to reach the door. The private guards reacted on instinct. One moved to intercept him, hands up in the placating posture security uses with expensive athletes. The other glanced at the console, saw the temperature meter spike as Cade tripped the coolant sensor loop, and turned fully toward the relay bank. Inside the duct, Cade slid the diagnostic key into a maintenance port and handed me a relay patch line. "When I say now, plug this into the meter backplane. Don't touch bare contacts." "Why?" "Because it will arc through your scar if the triad frequency is live." That was specific enough to obey. June's voice echoed in the corridor. "I don't care what your list says, I felt a pull. You want another collapse in the press cycle?" A guard replied, "Sir, you are not authorized in this zone." "Then authorize me or call someone who can." Katie whispered, "He's better at this than he looks." "He's been surviving officials since we were 12. The coolant alarm escalated. As the second guard moved deeper into the relay room toward the manifold panel, Katie's fingers danced across the diagnostic key, bypassing prompts faster than I could read them. "Now." I plugged in the patch line. The relay meter flared. Pain hit my side like a heated cable drawn under skin. I bit down hard enough to taste blood and held the line steady while Cade copied active calibration parameters, route tables, and target profiles into her slate. Her eyes widened. "No, no, no." "What?" "They tagged it as environmental bleed suppression." She kept scrolling. "False label. Actual profile is custom. It's keyed to triad resonance signatures and routed through civic calibration exemptions." Mina's voice came through the duct grate from the corridor, tight with pain. "It's spiking. Hurry." Cade finished the copy and yanked the key free. The relay meter dropped. The burn in my side eased from screaming to a heavy throb. Then the relay room lights shifted from white to amber and a security tone sounded. Katie froze. I didn't trigger an alarm. A flat voice came over the internal speaker. "Unauthorized maintenance handshake detected. Seal spine level." The corridor blast shutters started to descend. Safe system failure. Not because it broke, because it worked for the wrong people. "Move," Cade snapped. We reversed out of the duct just as June shouldered the nearest guard into the doorframe, and Mina stumbled back from the junction, one hand on the wall, eyes bright with pain and fury. Shutters dropped at both ends of the corridor, cutting off the main exits. Red lock glyphs lit over every door panel. Joan looked at Cade. "Tell me you have another route." Cade pointed down. "Broadcast cable trench, ladder hatch behind relay room." The second guard had recovered and was reaching for a baton. June stepped into him before the baton cleared its loop, drove him into the console bank, and yelled, "Go, I'll—" Mina said, "No heroic splitting." Even in that corridor, even half collapsing, she sounded like she was done with all of us. We all went. The ladder hatch was half hidden behind a coil rack and sealed with a maintenance wheel. Katie and I spun it together while June held the first guard off and the second shouted into his comms for lock team response. The hatch gave with a metallic groan. Hot air surged up from below, carrying the smell of ozone and insulation. June dropped through first, then reached up for Mina. Her suppressor band flashed under her sleeve as another low pulse rolled through the spine. She nearly missed the rung. I caught her wrist and got her weight onto the ladder while Katie kicked the hatch shut above us just as the first baton strike hit metal. The cable trench was narrower than I expected and louder, packed with bundled broadcast lines and field conduits running like arteries under the arena. We moved crouched, one hand on the rail, the other feeling for footing between junction boxes. Somewhere above us, the dome speakers ran test tones for the finals intro package, all triumph and percussion while we stumbled through heat and cable dust. June glanced back at me while moving. "Did you get the logs?" Katie answered for me. "Enough to prove targeted calibration routing through civic exemptions." "Can we use it?" "If we live to upload it properly." The trench forked at a marker plate. Uplink access/camera grid/archive buffer. Cade hesitated for the first time all night. June noticed. "What?" She looked at the plate, then at me. "We can leave now through archive buffer and get the evidence out. Or we can go to camera grid and try to plant the triad alert trigger in the finals overlay stack." June stared at her. That was always the plan. It was a possible plan. And it becomes a stupid plan if security already flagged our handshake. Mina, breathing hard but steadier now, said, "If we only release logs, they deny. Delay. Counter story. They still air the wedding segment." Katie's jaw tightened. She knew Mina was right. I said, "What's the success condition for camera grid?" Katie answered immediately, which meant she had been thinking about it before this night. "Patch a conditional overlay into the emergency error channel using their own maintenance tag. If triad frequency crosses threshold during live field activation, the system throws a legacy safety alert to all public screens before operators can clip the feed. Short window. Seconds." "Can you do it?" She looked at June. "Can he keep security off us for those seconds?" June rolled his shoulders, winced, and grinned without humor. "I can keep them busy." Mina looked at me. "And if the pulse hits again?" I touched the pocket where her written statement slate sat beside the settlement letter. Then we make sure it hits with witnesses." No one liked the answer. All three agreed anyway. We took the camera grid fork. The grid room sat behind a mesh partition and 2 old electronic locks, mostly unmanned during maintenance because modern systems are remote-controlled. Mostly failed us again. A single night operator sat inside with headphones on, half watching a replay feed while a security alert blinked in the corner of his screen. He looked tired, underpaid, and one step from becoming a problem. Katie slipped through the first lock before he turned. June stepped in front of the mesh panel and barked, "I need a field sync replay now. My manager says your lag nearly cooked my side." Loud enough to trigger defensive politeness. The operator pulled one headphone off. "Who authorized?" Cade hit the room lights. Darkness for a half second. Enough. When emergency strips came on, she was behind him with a suppressor strap looped around his wrist and mouth. Not choking, just immobilizing. June caught the rolling chair before it crashed into the console. I shut the door and held Mina upright while she fought another pulse tremor. The operator's eyes were huge. Katie spoke right into his ear, low and precise. "You are not dying tonight. Nod if you understand." He nodded hard. She zipped his wrists, moved him to the floor by the wall, and shoved a folded jacket under his head. Look away and count to 300. Jun blinked. You carry restraint ties now? Katie didn't look at him. I prepare for management. Then she was at the main console, fingers moving over tabs and diagnostic layers so fast the screens blurred. She pulled up finals overlay stacks, sponsor crawl packages, emergency channels, and legacy safety protocols that should have been retired years ago and clearly weren't. I laid Mina's slate on the side console and keyed her statement file into the upload queue. June looked at me. What are you doing? If the alert hits, her statement goes with the archive hash and the settlement page. Not just error code, context. Katie snapped. 30 seconds. Security is hard-pinging grid nodes. Mina forced herself upright and stepped to the secondary meter panel despite me reaching for her. Tell me what threshold you're using. Katie shot her a look. You can read field meters? Mina gave a tight, angry smile. I did relay coding before I got sick. Men keep explaining my own hospital scans to me. Show me. Katie shifted aside. Mina scanned the meter, eyes narrowing. This threshold is too high. They can run a symbolic vow pulse under it and still trigger us. Drop by 7%. Katie stared for half a beat, then changed the value. Fine, June muttered, almost impressed. Okay. Mina did not look at him. Don't sound surprised. The internal speaker crackled. Camera grid, report status, unauthorized presence detected on spine level. Lockout in 10 seconds. Katie's voice stayed level. Patches in. Need final authentication token. She looked at June. He frowned. Why me? Because the system prioritizes athlete-facing safety alerts over maintenance warnings during live activation. Your license tag gets the overlay to the main screen before operators can demote it. June's face changed. If I sign this, they'll bury me. Katie didn't soften it. Yes. Mina's hands were shaking at the meter panel. If you don't, they marry us to a sponsor package on live broadcast and call it healing. June swallowed once, then pulled his fighter tag from inside his jacket. Do it. Katie slammed the tag onto the reader. The console accepted the authentication, then flashed a warning in red. Conditional alert injection, traceable action. Continue? June looked at it, then at me. We had fought before, over stupid things and serious ones, but never over a line like this. He gave a crooked half-smile that looked more tired than brave. Don't make that face, Ray, he said. I already know I should have read my contracts. He hit continue. The patch took. At the same moment, the door locks dead-bolted from the outside, and a harder security tone flooded the room. Katie hissed. They found us. We're done here. I grabbed Mina's slate and the copied logs. June pulled the operator's headphones fully off and said, Count slower, which made no sense, but somehow calmed the man more than an apology would have. We got out through the archive buffer ladder with security on the other side of the grid door and shouting on comms. The buffer route dumped us into a stormwater culvert beyond the outer loading bays. Ankle-deep runoff, rain hammering the grates overhead. By the time we reached the street, every ad screen on South Ring's facade was back to sponsor loops and bracket animations. No sign of intrusion. No sign we'd been inside. For 6 hours, nothing happened. That was the worst part. No arrests, no takedown notices, no public statement. Astor Crown aired morning segments as usual. East Spire issued a bland memo about ongoing review of an athlete-spectator incident. June's sponsor manager left increasingly panicked messages. K-Day disappeared to avoid immediate detention and sent only one text. If patch survived, it triggers only on live field threshold. No test runs. Mina slept in short bursts between pain spikes. June paced until I wanted to throw him through the wall. I uploaded duplicate evidence bundles to 2 more archive channels and set timed releases to coincide with the finals broadcast if our connection dropped. Every hour made me more certain the patch had failed and we had burned our leverage for nothing. Then finals night arrived. South Ring was sold out. The city was primed. Astor Crown pushed the wedding promos harder than the match cards. A promise under pressure, She had love and victory in one historic broadcast. They never used the word legal. They never needed to. The comment feeds did the rest. We did not go inside. That would have ended with security, detention, and a clean narrative about unstable participants disrupting a public event. Instead, we set up in a repair shop apartment above a transit lane 2 districts over, where the owner owed Katie's support tech a favor and asked no questions once he saw the cash and the med kit. Mina wore both suppressor bands crossed over the anchor line. June had a temporary dampener strapped so tight around his ribs he could barely turn. I sat between them with the evidence slate open, upload channel armed. Katie arrived 10 minutes before live start in civilian clothes and a bruise spreading along her jaw, then dropped into a chair like she had not slept. "License suspended," she said before anyone asked. "Pending conduct review." June looked at her. "Because of last night?" "Yeah, because I stopped being convenient." She nodded at the screen. "Let's see if your face was worth the access token." The finals broadcast opened exactly the way Caro 9 loves to see itself. Polished hero shots, patriotic strings, slow-motion fight clips, commentators talking about grit and unity while sponsor logos rotated in prayer wheel loops. June's suspension was framed as a health safeguard. Mina was described as guest of honor and recovery symbol. The segment producer used her hospital image anyway. Mina's mouth tightened. She said nothing. Match 1 started. Standard field activation. No pulse in the room beyond a faint warmth. Match 2. Heavier output. June winced once but shook it off. Katie watched the field spectrum graph on a side feed and muttered, "They're ramping in layers." I asked, "For what?" She didn't look away. "For the vow segment. They want a dramatic luminal backdrop. Bigger field, bigger visual bloom, bigger risk." By the time the finals break arrived, Astor Crown had half the city watching. The commentators shifted tone, voice lower, softer, as if entering sacred ground instead of a sponsored spectacle. The ring floor reconfigured. Decorative light pylons rose around center stage. A host in white and gold walked out with a smile designed by committee. "And now," he said, "before our championship bout, a moment of courage and devotion." Mina's anchor flashed under the suppressor bands. June grabbed his side. My scar burned hot. Katie leaned toward the side feed. "They've engaged triad range calibration under ceremonial field aesthetics. That threshold," she stopped. "That threshold crosses our patch." On the main screen, the host continued talking while attendants guided 2 stand-ins toward center stage. One in a suit cut like June's sponsor uniforms. One in a dress shaped to flatter Mina's archived measurements. Not even them. Replacements for the camera block until the surprise reveal. It was uglier than I expected, and I had expected ugly. Then Southring's screens went black for exactly 1 second. Every channel in the room glitched at once. When the image returned, it was not the host. A red legacy safety overlay filled the entire broadcast feed in plain civic script, louder and uglier than sponsor graphics, impossible to mistake for a planned segment. Unregistered sympathetic triad link detected, live field threshold exceeded risk, to linked anchor recipients calibration routing, flagged under civic exemption event log, sealed, copy exists. For a fraction of a second, the stadium crowd went silent even through the broadcast delay. Then Mina's statement file hit. Not as a dramatic voiceover, not edited. White text on black beside the alert frame, and names and dates and procedures in the sentence. My image and recovery status were used in broadcast promotions without my consent while my treatment was delayed after an adverse event. At the same time, I released the evidence bundle, glitch frame, maintenance bulletin hash, sponsor addendum excerpts, settlement page scan, and the copied calibration logs showing triad target routing disguised as environmental suppression. Astor Crown cut to commentators. The overlay punched through. They cut to crowd cam. The overlay punched through. They killed the arena audio entirely and tried a sponsor slate. The overlay stayed on top for 8 more seconds. Maybe 9. Long enough. Long enough for clips, for mirrors, for side channels. For every rival network and contract scavenger and union rep and angry med student and bored archive nerd in Cairo 9 to record it and repost, before Astor Crown regained control. The broadcast returned to chaos. Commentators stumbling. Security entering the ring. Host gone. Crowd yelling. Not cheering. Half the feed split with technical interruption banners, while comment crawls exploded with words the city hates in public. Consent, fraud, experiment, cover-up. In our room above the transit lane, all three of our scars were burning so hard it was hard to stand. Mina curled forward but did not collapse. June was white-faced and sweating through his shirt. My vision tunneled at the edges. Kada had one hand on the side console and the other already opening the med kit. "Bands tighter," she snapped. I helped Mina cinch hers while June failed to work his clasp one-handed and swore until Katie did it for him with brutal efficiency. The pain peaked, then dropped in jagged steps as Southring cut the ceremonial field, and emergency dampers flooded the dome. On the broadcast, security personnel now ringed the stage pylons, while a legal analyst on Astor Crown's own backup desk tried to say unverified interference materials over a split screen of our documents. June started laughing, then winced because laughing hurt. "He's reading my sponsor addendum on live TV." Mina, breathing hard, looked at the screen through wet eyes and said, "They can't call that wedding segment a rumor now." She was right. The host script had already aired in the first few seconds before the glitch. The stand-ins had been visible. The field threshold had triggered the alert. Their own safety architecture, old, ugly, and never meant for public PR, had stamped the contradiction in front of the city. It wasn't victory, it was exposure. The consequences came immediately. Astor Crown denied malicious intent and blamed unauthorized sabotage of maintenance systems. East Spire suspended 2 Anchor Division administrators and announced an independent review led by people who all seemed to know each other. While June's sponsor terminated his contract for misconduct and security compromising conduct prejudicial to broadcast integrity, Katie's suspension became a formal disciplinary hearing. Mina's postponed treatment slot was suddenly available again, which told us exactly how much delay had been pressure, not medicine. And then the State Guild Medical Board issued an emergency injunction on all sponsor-funded triad-capable anchor modifications pending audit. That one mattered. The city did what it always does after public embarrassment: deny, fragment, investigate slowly, and punish anyone easy to reach. But it also had to freeze the mechanism in public, at least for a while, because too many witnesses had seen the same thing at once. The next week passed in hearings, statements, threats, and exhaustion. June gave testimony to a review panel, and for the first time in his life, read every line before signing. He lost the finals path, the sponsor apartment, and most of the easy future the Collegium had promised him. He also stopped pacing when Mina slept, and started showing up to every treatment consult with a notebook, and questions that annoyed specialists into answering properly. Katie faced a conduct tribunal, insulted 2 board members with almost artistic restraint, and kept her license suspended pending outcome. Off camera, support crews and junior fighters started sending her anonymous tips about sponsor clinics and off-ledger recovery programs. Becoming inconvenient had made her useful in a new direction. Mina resumed treatment under a different team at East Spire, this time with every procedure logged and copied before discharge. The doctors called her non-compliant once because she refused to sign a broad media release buried in a treatment packet. Yet she handed the packet back and asked them to define therapeutic publicity benefit in plain language. They revised the form. As for me, I became a donor advocate by accident and a problem on purpose. People started contacting me through archive channels: patients, former fighters, one widow from the North Wards, whose husband signed a resilience enhancement clause before a construction accident rehab and died under a field complication nobody explained. We did not have proof for all of them. We had enough patterns to keep pulling. Months later, Astor Crown aired a heavily edited public accountability special, with somber music and legal disclaimers and no mention of the wedding promo crawl. East Spire published new consent rules and called them reforms. The city council announced a committee. June watched the special in silence, then turned off the screen halfway through. Same story, he said. Different narrator. By then, Mina could climb the apartment stairs again without stopping. She still had pain days when distant arena tests made the scar line throb through the suppressors. But the episodes were less violent after the field board injunctions. She never went back to relay coding for the companies she used to apply to. She started training patient intake workers on contract literacy in the lower wards instead. Her sessions were always full. One night, after a long clinic day, she found the original settlement page in my drawer, where I had kept it folded between old bills and post-op scans. "You still have this," she said. "Evidence. Also anger." She wasn't wrong. I took the page from her and looked at the handwritten line again. "You have already given enough. Do not mistake attention for justice." I had thought about that sentence more than I like to admit. It wasn't advice, it was management. A reminder that pain becomes expensive only when it becomes visible. Mina sat beside me on the floor, shoulder against mine, careful of the scar. "Did you ever regret not taking it?" I answered honestly. Every time the bills hit, every time your treatment got delayed, every time June looked like he'd burned down his own life. I folded the page once, neat this time. And every time someone writes to say they checked their contract because of what happened, I regret it less. She nodded, not satisfied, not disagreeing. That was the shape of it in the end. Not a clean win, not a heroic ending. Just a city forced to look at one mechanism it preferred hidden, and 4 people living with the cost of making it visible. June still trains, unofficially, in small gyms with bad lighting and no cameras. K-Day sometimes drops by those gyms when no one is supposed to know where she is. They still insult each other on site. The loyalty is louder now. Mina's scar still flashes faintly during certain storm broadcasts, when the field grids stutter across the wards, and my old donor line still burns in answer if I'm close enough to a dome. The link never fully disappeared. East Spire calls it residual sympathetic retention. Mina calls it a receipt. I call it a reminder that the city is built from systems that keep insisting they are neutral, while choosing who gets hurt first. The live TV wedding never happened, but clips of the setup still circulate in rumor threads, as if people aren't sure whether to treat it as scandal, joke, or warning. Maybe it is all 3. Sometimes, late, when the transit lanes quiet down and the haze thins just enough to see the upper ward lights, I think about that first consent form and the line the clerk called a legacy formatting issue. Organ donors sign combat waivers. I initialed because I thought it was meaningless legal overgrowth. It turned out to be the only honest sentence on the page. The city knew exactly what kind of arena it was building around us, and once you see that, even love does not go back to being private.